What goes up must come down. Welcome to the Brand Breakdown. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Courtney.
And this is where we're going to track the rise and fall of big brands, from companies to celebs to pop culture phenoms and everything in between. Let's get started.
So we have been having a lot of excitement the last few days, but really the excitement began tonight, right before we started to record with Courtney's little boy. Do you want to tell us about it, Courtney?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I would call it excitement necessarily, but so the story actually starts this morning because my son came downstairs when he woke up this morning and he was like all super smiley and he climbed onto my lap and I gave him a hug and I was like, oh, he had like a funk about him. And I was like, what is this? And so I kind of like sniffed him and then I like moved my hand a little bit from like his back, like just a little bit down. And I was like, oh, buddy, you're soaking wet. And he must have peed like in his sleep or something and then just slept in pee all night. And that's like really gross and also very like out of the ordinary for him. He's almost 4 years old. And so I took him upstairs and I gave him a shower, changed him, took his sheets off his bed, like the whole nine. And so tonight at bedtime, I was like, all right, you're not going to take a shower tonight because we already gave you a shower. So, you know, you only need one shower a day. So we'll give you a shower tomorrow. And he got all upset and he's like, I want to take a shower. I want to take a shower. And I was like, well, like we're not taking a shower. And so I put him in his jammies. He's all cozy and comfy. And he's standing in the middle of his room. And I'm sitting in his chair getting ready to like read him stories. And he goes, but what happens if I pee in the night again? And I was like, well, of course I'll, you know, if you pee in the night, I'll give you a shower. Because I'm sitting here thinking he's like trying to determine if I'm like this negligent parent who's going to let him just like wallow in pee. You. Yeah. And I'm like, oh no, buddy, like, of course I'll give you a shower and I'll clean you up if you pee in the night. I'm not going to punish you or something for peeing. Like, of course not. And he goes, okay. And then he just kind of stays standing in the middle of his room and he looks at me. And I'm like looking at him and then he just goes, Mama, look. And he points down because he's just standing in the middle of his bedroom peeing all over himself and all over the floor because he wanted to take a shower. And he had realized that if he pees, I just told him I will give him a shower and clean him up. So he peed on command in the middle of his room. And yeah, that's how my night's going.
Oh my God, it cracks me up so much. I love it.
I'm so glad it's bringing you joy because I think I'm raising a psycho now and like I don't know what to do.
I think you're raising a really clever child who saw an opportunity and took it.
Like that is dedication to the loophole though, if I have ever seen it.
It's good stuff. My gosh. It's good stuff. And in 10 years when he's 14, you will think it's hilarious. It's good stuff. I just wanted to share that because like, you know, we're all human. A lot of us are mamas. And this has happened to everybody. Like everybody's had a child that has done something so willful and so like horrifying and you're so upset at the time, but then later it's really, really funny. So that was yours.
I can't wait until he brings his first, like, you know, boyfriend or girlfriend home in 10 years. And I'm like, oh, do I have a story for you? Let me tell you what you're getting yourself into. Because this kid we always say he's like the most stubborn person on the planet. But now I'm like actually kind of afraid for the rest of my life with how stubborn he has just proven himself to be.
Oh, I think it's hilarious. And he's smart. I think that's part of it is he's smart. So clearly he worked the loophole right away at 4.
Yeah, super fast. Like he quizzed me. He asked the right questions in the right way to make sure that I was, you know, committed to giving him the answer he wanted. And then he just went for it. He just fully went for it. So
dude, that's so funny. When my son was, I think he was actually 3, he got a permanent magic marker, pink and I think pink and black maybe. I still have a picture somewhere, but mostly pink. Drew all over his entire face in permanent marker.
Oh God.
His whole entire face was permanent marker. And then he looks at me and he says, I look so good like this. It was so funny. And he looked like I can't. I was so horrified, and he had to go to school like that for days because we couldn't get it off.
Oh,
Everybody was like,
gosh.
"Do rubbing alcohol, do this, do that." Like, I mean, I did all the home remedies, and nothing got it off. And
Just had to wait for it to fade.
Yeah, just had to wait it out. It was good times. Anyway, so I thought we'd start the night with a fun little story like that because we're going to go right into Kate Part 5. This is called The Duchess of Doolittle, because that is what she was dubbed a few years ago prior to having Prince George. So, Courtney, I want you to get started and kind of let's talk through it and see how far we can get tonight, because I'm kind of hoping we can get to where we are right now in the world. But if not, it'll be in the next episode for sure. So get us started. Tell us about the Duchess of Doolittle and how she got that lovely moniker.
Yeah. So, upon William and Catherine's marriage, William, if you guys had listened to the Sussex series that we did, upon Harry's wedding, he became the Duke of Sussex. That was a title that was granted to him just before, literally the morning of the wedding. And so when Harry got married, he was the Duke of Sussex, and Meghan became the Duchess of Sussex. When William and Kate got married, prior to the wedding, William had been named the Duke of Cambridge. And so upon their marriage, Kate instantly became the Duchess of Cambridge. And one of the really fun things for dorks like me, I guess, during all of these royal wedding shenanigans is trying to figure out what peerages the men will be given, if they will be given any, because there's only a few royal peerages available. And so it's kind of fun to see who's going to get what. So William was given Cambridge, and he's also the Earl of Strathern in Scotland, and he has, I think he's Baron, I want to say Renfrew, but I don't know if that's correct, in England.
Wasn't that Dracula's sidekick?
Or Northern, maybe? I don't know. Is it?
I think that was a movie earlier this year, and he was Dracula's sidekick. I don't know.
Oh.
Maybe we should look that up.
Not entirely sure. But yeah,
I mean, I would love it if William was Dracula's sidekick. That would be amazing.
That would give a lot of credence to some of the rumors that are going around about Kate right now, but we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, so Kate becomes the Duchess of Cambridge, and people are so excited. The Cambridges are riding this wave of goodwill. People have been so excited for their wedding. Kate has really, she has fully shed the Weighty Katie moniker that had been following her for the whole time that she was dating William. And it was, will they, won't they? They broke up, they got back together and all of that. She's fully shed that. And now people are like, okay, let's see what she does as a Duchess. Let's see how she does as a princess. And her first couple of engagements that she went on, she did a few joint engagements with William, but Kate was kind of slow diving into the world of being a working royal, which actually surprised a lot of people because she had been around it for so long. Her and William had been dating forever, and people were like, okay, she should probably know the ropes by now. She should be ready to dive in. She should have done all her research about what patronages she wanted and what causes she wanted to support. What is the problem here? And there were two camps about this. One dubbed her the Duchess of Doolittle, and they were like, she's lazy. She didn't work when she was dating William. She's not working now. She is just, the biggest freeloader of them all. She's just going to ride on the coattails of the royal family, do the bare minimum, and that's it. And then there was another camp. Well, actually, there's probably three camps. There's probably one camp who's like, we do not care. Why do you people care so much about this? And there was the third camp, which is the one that I was in, where my opinion was that William and Kate got married, and they knew that they were in this for the rest of their life. This is not, being a royal is not a sprint, which some recently married and royal wives may find to be a shock. But it's not a sprint. These things do not change quickly. There is no rush, because when she got married in 2011, she knew that this is what she was going to be doing for the rest of her life, right? This was not something where she... Yeah, like it is for sure a long game. At the time they got married, I think she was 28. She's probably sitting there being like, okay, my grandmother-in-law is in her 80s and still going very strong. Like, I've got some time. I have another 50 or 60 or 70 years of being in this role. I can, and you know, the role being a working royal, not necessarily in the position she was in as the Duchess of Cambridge. But she was probably like, you know, I don't have to dive in right away. And William seemed to really support that. And it has always been said from the very beginning of their marriage that William's priority was going to be letting Catherine kind of adjust to everything at a speed that she was comfortable with and protecting her as much as she wanted or needed to be protected from the type of hysteria that kind of surrounded his mother when she was in the similar position. Obviously, Diana was the Princess of Wales from the jump. Kate was not. Another thing that people like myself liked to point out was that at the time of their marriage, William and Catherine were not the Prince and Princess of Wales. They were not the next in line. Although so many people liked to kind of just forget that Charles exists. And they used to, yeah, like people really wanted to skip him for some reason. But people were like, oh, you know, they need to step up because William, you know, he kind of got the lazy moniker too, although he had a full-time job. He was an RAF pilot and then he was a search and rescue pilot. But people were like, you know, why aren't they doing more royal work? And it's like, well, William's not the heir. He's the heir to the heir. He's an entire generation back from where his father was when he took this role. And there hadn't, in a really long time, there hadn't been an heir to the heir who was a grown adult who would be undertaking royal engagements. Like, this was kind of new territory because most monarchs didn't live as long as the Queen did, you know? So
yeah,
it was kind of it was uncharted territory. And William, for his part, was an RAF search and rescue pilot. Him and Catherine, when they got married, they were living in Wales. After the wedding, they went back to Wales. She was essentially a stay-at-home wife. She was, you know, learning the royal ropes. She was having the meetings that she needed to have. She was putting her office together. She was doing her research on her charities. She was undertaking engagements here and there. But her focus was on supporting her husband in his, you know, private work as a pilot and also his public work as a royal. And also they were planning on starting a family. So people were like people just were like, oh, she's lazy. She's not going to work. She's not doing anything. She's the Duchess of Doolittle. And from my perspective,
I just love that name. I think it's hilarious. I'm so sorry.
Whoever comes up with the names is very clever. They're not always very kind, but they're very clever.
They're very well. You know, the British people in general do really well with those types of things. You know, the dry sense of humor and you know, that kind of like everything with a zinger. Like they just are so brilliant in that way.
A little bit of like a dark humor, dry humor type of thing.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah. So I don't know. I spent a lot of time back when I was just like a keyboard warrior royal watcher before we started a podcast about it. I spent a lot of time like just defending her and being like, listen, she's going to do this for the next 70 years. Give her a break. Like, she doesn't, one of my arguments has always been, and I guess right now it's not as relevant, but like, if the Queen was fine with it, then we should be fine with it. Because if Her late Majesty had a problem with the amount of work that William and Catherine were or weren't doing, she would be the one to step in and correct it. Obviously, she never did that. And therefore, what are we so concerned about? Their office at the time was supported by the Duchy of Cornwall, which was at the time headed by then Prince Charles, now the King. So whether they were working a ton or not working at all, it wasn't really an extra expenditure because the size of their office was the size of the office at the time. When Catherine married William, she hired on like she hired on a private secretary and a personal assistant, I think, and that was it. She didn't hire. They have a pretty large staff now at Kensington Palace, but it's not like she hired on tons and tons and tons of people. So the expenditure didn't really increase that much. I guess, upon their engagement, she got her security detail, so that increased a bit. But it wasn't, nothing much had changed between her being a girlfriend and the first couple of years of their relationship.
All right, I have a quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
So what's the difference in England between a private secretary and a personal assistant? That feels like the same thing to me.
So, and I might have misspoke. So press secretaries and then personal assistants.
Oh, okay.
So their press secretaries are kind of like their communications department. And then everybody has they have like their press secretary and their assistant press secretaries, which are, they're like PR people, but they're kind of also like executive assistants. And then they've got their personal assistants who are like executive assistants, but then also help them with their non-royal stuff as well, because there's this weird working relationship, right, where they're members of the royal family. They have a part of their life that is their job and a part of their life that is their private life. And the two are very often intertwined because they can't really have one without the other. And so they hire people who, some of their job is to strictly only deal with royal stuff, but then there are some of their staff where they kind of deal with both sides of the coin, depending on, like, Kate has she has a dresser, and also William has a valet. But like, they don't just help them only for royal things, I imagine. I would imagine that if they were going to a fancy, society event or whatever, we've got the Duke of Westminster's wedding coming up later this year. If William and Kate are in attendance, which I believe they're planning on being, I imagine Kate's team will be helping her find like the perfect dress, and her stylist will be doing her hair and all of that stuff. It's not just only for royal stuff.
Okay. All right. I just wasn't sure exactly what that was.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's funny because we don't have press secretaries here unless you work for the White House. Like the White House has press secretaries, and that's pretty much it. But the only other people in the US who seem to have a press secretary and really rely on them would be the Sussexes. They have I think they have like a global press secretary, they call the position, if it's still filled. And it is something that's a little bit confusing to Americans because they're like, what is a press secretary? Oh, you mean your PR person. Okay, got it.
That's interesting that they travel with like a full-time PR person. I mean, I get it. It's just, it's interesting. I mean, I would imagine it would be stressful a little bit.
Well, and that's the thing. Like when you look at the royals, like their press secretaries and their PAs, they're with them at every engagement. Whereas like if you look at a celebrity or a politician, they don't necessarily have their PR person with them, right? But a celebrity might have their agent with them or their manager with them. A politician's probably got their campaign manager or their press secretary, quasi person, whoever they have, like a communications director or whatever. But the role of press secretary for the royals, it's not just exclusively dealing with the press. It's kind of dealing with anything to do with public stuff. And actually, one of the people who, sorry, I'm Googling something. One of the people who, during the Sandringham Summit with the Sussexes and the royal family, who was like very heavily involved in working everything out, was Simon Case. And at the time, he was the private secretary to Prince William. So even though his job was to be the private secretary, he was still dealing with these kind of like inter-family negotiations and like writing memos to the Queen's staff and to Prince Charles's staff, then Prince Charles, obviously he is now the king. So their role is just, it's not really like one that we have here necessarily. And then also the other complicated thing about it is a lot of people who are private secretaries and press secretaries and all of that are on like secondments from the military. It's not necessarily just somebody who went to college and was like, oh, I want to be a PR person. They're a civil servant who has worked through the ranks of either civil service, as in like they've worked for parliament and stuff, or they've been like an enlisted member of the military. So they just do things different there than we do it here, I guess.
It's interesting. I got you off topic, but let's go back. So Duchess of Doolittle, so now she has finished those first 2 years of Duchess of Doolittle, and what's happening now?
Yeah, so after her first couple of years of marriage where people were like, oh, you're not doing anything, Kate kind of got to tell everyone to back off a little bit because she got pregnant with Prince George. And her pregnancy was announced much earlier than she probably would have liked it to have been because she was sick with, and I am always going to say it wrong, it's HG, hypergravidia. Yeah. It sounds like a Harry Potter thing. Like, honestly, it,
yeah. It's the vomit disease of pregnancy.
Yes. Yeah. So severe morning sickness to the point where she had to be admitted to the hospital for a few days. And so obviously to admit her to the hospital, they had to explain why she was there. And so they announced that she was pregnant. She suffered from HG through all 3 of her pregnancies. And she actually has done a podcast episode. She was a guest on a podcast speaking about it. And it sounds absolutely horrific. I have a couple of friends who have since.
I have a really close friend who's had it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where, you know, she was diagnosed with it. And I think at the time people were like, what do you mean you're being hospitalized for morning sickness? Like, whatever.
Oh, it's not morning sickness.
Right. But I think that she being hospitalized with it brought so much more awareness to it because, you know, it's a very public figure that you're seeing a public figure be hospitalized for something. And you're like, oh, it really can be that serious. It's not just, you know, somebody who just can't hack it or something ridiculous like that.
My friend was so sick all 3 of her pregnancies. Her first child, she threw up every single day for 9 months. Every single day for 9 months. I was like, oh my God. Like, I was terrified for when I didn't have children till much later, but I was terrified. Oh my God, what if that happens to me? But it didn't. It was fine.
Yeah. It's one of those things that it's when Kate was diagnosed with it, I remember them saying like it was pretty rare, like very severe and pretty rare. And now the amount of people that I've heard who have been diagnosed with it, I'm like, oh, maybe it's not that rare. It was just one of those things that for a very long time
underdiagnosed.
Yeah, women were getting the brush off, and now that it's shocking. Kind of become, I know, surprise. So Kate was diagnosed with HG. She was in the hospital for a few days getting some treatment, and then throughout her pregnancy, she again was kind of a little bit slow on the engagements. However, at this point, people were like, oh, well, you know, she's got the future king or queen in her belly. So we're fine with that. And people kind of backed off because then everybody got so excited about the impending birth of a prince or princess. And what happened prior to Prince George being born is actually one of the things that there was a big change made for the child of the Duke of Cambridge. And basically what had happened is prior to 2013, when he was born, the letters patent, I think it was the letters patent of 1937, I think, said that the eldest son of the monarch would be the Prince of Wales, and the eldest son of the eldest son would be titled, and then all male line children would be, so it would be the all male line grandchildren of the monarch would be titled HRH Prince or Princess. So that is why Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie are princesses, because their father was the son of a monarch, so male line children, whereas Princess Anne's children, although Anne is a princess, they are just Zara and Peter. They are not titled because Anne is of the female line. So
I think that's wrong. P.S.
No,
I think it's wrong that they did that.
Oh, well,
But then they changed it.
Kind of.
Sort of.
That still stands. So it still stands that male line grandchildren of the monarch become titled. They are titled. However, the letters patent of 1937 also said it was the eldest son of the eldest son of the Prince of Wales. The eldest son of the eldest son of the Princess Wales. So Prince of Wales. So like basically, if the Prince of Wales, who at the time was Charles, if the Prince of Wales had a son, William, and that person had a son, that son, the grandson, would be titled at birth. No other children on that level would. No other great-grandchildren of the monarch would be born titled. And so, what they did is the line of succession had been changed so that William's first child, whether male or female, would be the monarch. But without changing that title situation with the letters patent, it meant that had George been born a girl, and it was Princess Georgette, he would have actually just been Lady Georgette and been titled as the daughter of a duke, not as a princess. And so that meant that the future queen wouldn't be a princess at birth. Eventually she would, because when her... Well, it's still kind of the way it is now. And that brings us to all the drama with the Sussexes, because what they did is they issued a new letters patent that said all children of the eldest son of the Prince of Wales would be titled at birth. Meaning George was automatically titled, and Charlotte was also automatically titled, and Louis was also automatically titled, because these are children who their father will be king one day. So give them a title from birth. It doesn't really matter necessarily. I guess back in the day, it kind of did matter because Prince of Wales's sometimes didn't make it to be king. People were dying much earlier.
Right.
Things were happening.
Right.
But before George was born, they said, you know what? All of William's children will be titled at birth. Only William's children. This only applied to the children of the eldest son of the Prince of Wales, not Harry's kids.
And this is before Harry was married or had kids.
Yes. Harry had never even heard of Meghan Markle at this point, probably.
Right.
Unless he had watched Suits.
Which brings us to some of that drama for your mama that comes later that was false.
Exactly. Because this is the basis of what Harry and Meghan said. Oh, they're not letting our kids be titled. They changed the rules for William, but they're not changing the rules for us. And the thing is, Archie and Lilibet are now titled because the second that Charles became king, they became the male line grandchildren of the monarch. And so they instantly became titled. They instantly got their titles. And
they got prince and princess titles, right?
Yes. And
but Harry and Meghan don't. I mean, Harry's a prince, but Meghan is not a princess.
Right. So Meghan is not a princess in her own right. She technically could go by Princess Harry, which Prince Michael of Kent, his wife goes by Princess Michael of Kent. Her name is not Michael. Her name is Maria Christine, or Marie Christine. I don't know. But she goes by Princess Michael. So Harry's wife could go by Princess Harry if she wanted to, but the Duchess of Sussex is, I think, much nicer sounding. But if you look at the birth certificates of the royal kids, on George, Charlotte, and Louis's birth certificate, it says that Kate's job is that she is a princess of the United Kingdom. I think possibly on Archie's, it may say the same thing under Meghan's job title. I'm not really sure. But they are kind of given, like, what's your job? My job is that I'm a princess. Like, that's my job.
I wish that were my job. I would like that to be my job.
I would be so good at it. Can you just
start calling me Princess Michelle?
Sure. Of course, Princess. Okay. No problem.
And I'll call you Princess Courtney.
Thanks. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of was the basis for a lot of the drama with the Sussexes, because they were saying they wanted the rules to change for them as well. And the palace was like, there's no need. Your kids will eventually become like prince and princesses when the time comes. And the only reason it had been changed for William's kids is because if William's first child had been a girl, that meant she would be the future queen, and they didn't want her to be the future queen and not be a princess. They thought it would sound weird for the future queen to be Lady so-and-so. And so they made that slight tweak because the order of succession was also changed.
Well, and
anyway.
and honestly, the prince and princess titles for Lilibet and Archie, I mean, who gives a rat's patootie? Because you would have to go through Charles, William, George, Charlotte, and Louis before you'd ever get to Harry, Archie, and Lilibet.
Right. Exactly.
Like you're a little ways down the line, my friends.
Right. And I mean, let's not forget, they don't live in the UK.
Right. And
they
anyway,
live in the
they
United
left
States.
the family. Right.
They live in the United States, where it doesn't necessarily matter that they're prince and princess, because, I mean, I guess as fun as it is to be like, oh yeah, I'm a princess, it doesn't give them any additional standing here necessarily. Whereas in the UK, being a prince or a princess, much bigger deal, because obviously their grandfather is the king and their uncle will be king one day and their cousin will be king one day. So much bigger deal for them to be a prince or princess there. But here, I mean, I would venture to say, you know how kids can be awful, right? Like maybe if I was in middle school and I was a princess, I might not want people to know because I don't want people to pick on me and like,
right.
You know, jealous people are going to be.
It's like being the president's kid. Like those poor Obama children, Malia and what's the other one's name? They're both so cute.
Sasha.
I can't remember. Sasha. I mean, it was hard for them to stay out of trouble and stay out of the public eye. And then the Bush twins. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That cute one that's on the Today Show. She got in trouble.
She's so cute
all the time. She was so cute.
Yeah. But
and
I could see
her sister
mean middle school kids
like in the limelight.
Yeah, and like I could see mean middle school kids using like, oh, like you're a princess as a bad thing, not a good thing. You know what I mean? Like a jealous 12-year-old little brat is probably going to use that against you. So
I mean, kids will use anything to bully you. Anything at all. And they're both gingers. So right there, I mean, it's, you know,
but they're so stinking cute. They're so stinking cute.
I have a ginger and it's not easy. It's hard to stand out. You don't want to stand out when you're in middle school and stuff like that.
Right.
You want to blend. It's hard.
And so I've always wondered why Harry and Meghan fought so hard to make sure their kids got their titles. I mean, if they were still in the UK, I guess it would make more sense because it's less of a big deal. Not that it's less of a big deal there, but it's a big deal in a way that's like important and actually matters. And there's so many other, in the circles that they are in and the schools that they would go to, there's so many other like lords and ladies and whoever's, and even princes and princesses from other countries who would be hanging out with them, that maybe it's not as big of a deal. But to fight for it so much to be in the US, I always thought was a little bit odd, because that's just putting a target on the kids. But
if they go back to England for boarding school for high school or whatever, I'm sure that they'll be, you know, glad to have those titles in boarding school.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, we digressed. Go back.
I know, we went so far off.
It's okay.
Because those Sussexes just managed to sneak back in.
Sussex us in. Sorry.
But so as Kate's pregnancy progressed, it was really interesting because the royals usually are very very sneaky about pregnancies, and they kind of say like, oh, they're due in the spring. You know, like, oh, she's due to deliver in the spring. And then it's like, okay, well, the spring, you know, starts in March and ends in June. So that's a few months of time. And people start trying to guess like when in the spring, and they start trying to do math and look at bumps and whatever. But with Kate having announced so early that she was pregnant because she was ill, and they said that, you know, they were announcing it very early. I think they even might have said she wasn't yet 3 months. So it really narrowed the time frame. And people were like, okay, we know it's the summer, because that's what they said, like she's due to deliver in the summer. But they knew, they being the press and the general public, knew that it was, you know, July, mid to late July. They had managed to narrow it down. And that's when the Great Door Watch started. I don't know if you watched that door like I did. But,
what's the door watch?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so in July 2013, there was a camera trained on a door of the Lido wing at St. Mary's Hospital, because the press knew that Kate would be giving birth soon. And so they literally set up, like 2 weeks before she was due, they set up a camera to watch that door and to see if they could catch her going in or out. And like there was live streams of the door. You could literally just sit and watch the door. And as more time passed, the crowd around the door got much larger, because obviously as more time passed, it was like, oh, now we're getting closer. Like no matter what happens, we're getting closer to the time where she'll be arriving. And so it was the Great Door Watch. And I spent many an hour watching that door and chatting with my other Royal Watcher friends. And it was a good time in Royal Watching history, I think. Although looking back, it's very weird. But we all sat and we watched a live stream of a door. And then on July 23rd, I believe, the next morning. So George was born on July 22nd, 2013. And I believe Kate left the hospital the following day. She may have left on the 24th. I'm not sure. But whatever the case may be, we watched the door for a few more days. And then Kate came out looking absolutely, literally flawless, wearing her blue polka dotted dress. And her hair perfectly cute. She looked so cute. And her hair was perfectly blown out, and she had her makeup on, and she was wearing high-heeled wedges, and she just looked gorgeous. And the whole world was like, oh my gosh, wonderful. And a lot of women were like, oh my God, I can't believe they would make someone do that. And now, having had 2 children, I can't imagine if anyone had wanted to see me within 3 weeks of giving birth. Never mind, 36 hours of giving birth.
I was a hot mess after I had my daughter.
Yeah, I was just a disaster.
Same.
There was no oh, I looked so cute. No, I did not look even slightly human for many weeks. After.
And with my son, I left the hospital with a spinal headache. So I was bent in half for 9 days or whatever, because the blood patch that they didn't work. And so, because they had tapped my spine so many times when they were putting in the epidural, that my spinal fluid was leaking out everywhere. So I was literally bent in half for the first 9 days after my son was born. I can't even imagine if they had said, all right, now stand up, put on some makeup, and throw on your wedges.
Yeah, I would have been like, no, thank you.
No.
After Connor was born, my oldest son, I remember just being, I don't actually remember much of the time period immediately after he was born for the first few weeks. I just remember being terrified. I didn't even want to hold him. I was so nervous to hold him, or I can't imagine if someone was like, do all these things, and 300 people are going to take your photo. I would have been like, no, thank you. I'm all set.
I just remember packing my daughter into the, the little car seat the first time. And I was like, oh my God, this baby's so tiny for this car seat. I'm so scared to put her in this car seat and drive away with her. What the hell? Why are they giving us this baby? They didn't tell us anything.
Yeah.
Oh God, the whole thing is so terrifying.
It's kind of wild. So I had a C-section with both of my kids. And so I couldn't even move, basically. They had just cut me in half. And I was very sick during the ends of my pregnancies and immediately after. And they still were like, okay, here you go. We know that you're I was being very closely monitored by my doctors because I could die. but they still send you home with a baby. And it's like, are you sure this is a good, I can't move.
Right?
You're worried I could like die at any moment. Like my baby's very, very small. Both of my children were extremely tiny, and they were early. And it's the funniest thing. So this is a huge digression off of the royal topic, but when Connor was born, I was in the hospital for 2 weeks before he was born and 4 days after he was born. And on the very first night of his life, the nurse brings him into our room because we kept sending him out because I was like so sick that they were taking him to the nursery for us. And the nurse brings him back and she's like, okay, we're going to bring him back for the night. And she gives us one of those like blue sucker bulb things. And she's like, all right, so if he starts to choke, just use this. And she puts it in his little bassinet and then just like leaves. And me and my husband are like, wait, what do you mean? What? And we like rang her, I like hit the nurse button and it like brought her back. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what do you mean if he starts to choke? Like, what are you talking about? And she's like, oh, you know, like C-section babies, because they don't get like squeezed out of your body, they sometimes have like a little bit of fluid in their lungs, and he's been a little bit like congested and coughing. So like he might start choking on the fluid that he's like trying to cough up. Like, have a good night. And I'm sitting there, again, had just been cut in half a few hours earlier. So I can't really move very quickly. My husband's never really been around babies before, and like not 7 minutes later Connor starts choking or coughing this like weird cough, and so we like freak out because we're like, oh my god, it's happening, like what do we do? And I just remember being like, having a baby is wild because they literally hand you a kid that you have no business having when you're in no condition to be in charge of literally anything, and they're like, good luck, have fun. And it's like, what is wrong with you people? Like in any other situation, this would be like, it would be a crime
I know, it's
be so negligent.
I know. My husband went with my daughter the first time they washed her off, and he's like, they had her by the foot and they were like hanging her upside down. He's like, I've never
just manhandle them.
Yes. He was completely appalled. He was like, you wouldn't even believe what they do to these kids when they wash them. It was so funny. Yeah.
I just think it's like wild. Because if I like had a major surgery and couldn't take care of my kid and was just like wallowing in my house trying to figure it out, like Child Protective Services would come and be like, you're not fit to be their mother right now. Like, what are you doing? But like when they're a day old, they're like, here you go.
Knock yourself out.
It's like, I don't see how this is different than if they're a year old and I was recovering from a major surgery, but okay, thank you, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know. It's
anyway.
funny. Yeah. You have to take a test to get a driver's license, but not to have a baby.
They'll just let anyone have a baby.
They just let anyone have a baby. I mean, they let babies have babies. It's so crazy. All right, hold on. We got to go back. We just totally digressed.
I don't even know. Total digression.
So
George was born.
She had George. She looked beautiful. They go home. She's still not working, so she's still the Duchess of Doolittle, but she has a baby, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so she's got this like grace period, right? Because now people are like, oh, well, she just had a baby, and, you know, she's like, her job is to produce an heir, and she's done it, so now she's got to produce a spare. And so Kate bought herself a few years of, yes, she was criticized. People have never thought she worked enough. They still don't think she does enough work. But during the time where George was little, she was pregnant with Charlotte, then she was pregnant with Louis. She kind of bought herself a little bit of leeway there. Although people still complained. And the palace would actually step in. And because again, throughout all of this, William is the heir to the heir. He's not the Prince of Wales yet. His father is next in line. His father is still working a ton. We also, you and I have discussed it here on the pod, that there has been this discussion of a slimmed down monarchy. The discussion about slimmed down monarchy started in July 2012 is when we saw it for the first time. It was during the Platinum Jubilee, I believe it was. Maybe it was the Diamond Jubilee at that point. I don't know. Some Jubilee, where we saw on the balcony the Queen, William and Catherine. It was the Queen, Charles and Camilla, William and Catherine, and Harry. And that was it. We didn't see the larger extended royal family. And that was the first signal of the slimmed down monarchy. So through this whole period, if you think back to what we talked about on Friday, if we know that William is planning on taking a very different approach to how he manages the royal family, where he's going to go for quality over quantity in terms of engagements, in my opinion, William and Catherine intentionally never took on a large workload, partially to let Catherine, settle into the role, partially because William was the heir to the heir, partially because they had young kids and they wanted to be very involved parents, but mostly because if they had taken on a very large workload and then backed off of it when William starts to enact his way of doing things, which is these more focused, larger initiatives like Earthshot, like the Early Year Center for Catherine and all of that, it would have looked bad. You know what I mean? Like it's better for them to ramp up than it is for them to back off. And 100%. So their workload has been pretty consistent from the time of their marriage through now in terms of how many engagements they do per year. And they don't come anywhere near as many engagements as Prince Philip did, or Princess Anne does, or the King does. Princess Anne does like 700 a year. The King does 700 a year. Prince Philip, even into his 90s, was doing like 300 or 400 a year. And William and Catherine have always done between like 150 and 200. And that's including tours, where when they do a tour, there might be like 25 engagements over the course of 4 days. Like there's a ton packed into a really short period of time. They've never done this huge number of engagements. And I think that's because it's easier for them to ramp up than it is to pull back. And William has known he's going to be doing things a different way than has been done. So they've taken a lot of flack for it, and they've been criticized a ton for their lack of work. And again, this is also keeping in mind that William, for a few years, was also working. He had a full-time job as a search and rescue pilot. Like, it's not like he was sitting around twiddling his thumbs. He was actually working and donating his salary to charity as he did it. So basically just working for the sake of liking to work. And people still criticize that. And they would say that he was a search and rescue pilot because he was just like trying to shirk his royal duties. And it's like, I think he's doing something, worthy enough for you to cut him some slack and give him a break. But yeah, they've always kind of been criticized for their lack of work.
Well, I think it's really admirable that he was a pilot and did all that for so long, because you need search and rescue pilots. It's not an easy job. And I think flying a helicopter is kind of hard. Like, it doesn't seem like something easy to do. So,
yeah.
And he donated his salary. I'm telling you, if I was a search and rescue pilot, I would be taking that salary. Now, I get it. He was wealthy, but that's a hard job. But anyway,
he would have to land a helicopter on the side of a mountain to not easy stuff.
Right. And you're the future king of England, so you're taking a giant risk in doing that anyway. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I think it's cool. And I love that she was a stay-at-home mom and didn't do as many engagements, and that they don't do as many engagements, because it kind of brings us to what we've been chatting about all throughout this particular episode, is that they want this slimmed down monarchy so that they can focus on the really important initiatives that are bigger and that they can actually dedicate more time to, the 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, however many they end up doing. Like you've said, the Earthshot and the Children's Center. And then there's another one too. Oh, the Heads Together. All those initiatives. What I think we should do next time is chat through from a brand perspective, all of those proposed initiatives that William will carry into his reign when he becomes king, and kind of break down what all those entail and what they're about, and what their plan is going forward with them, to show everybody that it's not that they don't work. It's just that they work differently.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the difference in the way William will manage the business of the monarchy is going to be quite striking compared to how we're used to seeing things. We're still in the aftershock of the late Queen's reign, and it'll be very different from that. People have said that Charles's reign is going to be a transitional reign. I don't necessarily know that that's true, because I don't want to discredit anything that he's going to do as well. But we do know his reign will likely be much shorter than his mother's was.
Yeah.
And he's starting to do things. I think he's like giving William the freedom to ease into what William's plans are. And I think he's fully supportive of the changes that William wants to make. So maybe Charles's reign does end up being a little bit of a transition period as opposed to, the Carolian era as some people want to see it. I don't necessarily know that Charles's reign is going to be the one that goes down in history as being super impactful, although we shall see because it's early yet.
Yeah, I don't think we know that yet. And we also don't know how his impact will then impact William, who will then impact George. So there's trickle down impact from these monarchs. I think Queen Elizabeth's reign was so unique, not only in its length, but in the way that she ran her monarchy. And I think that Charles and William and George will be very different from what she did. She started as like basically a teenager. So it will be very different. Well, this has been great. There was a lot of stuff in here I didn't know about. So that was super elucidating for me. Is that right? I think elucidating. I learned a lot, whatever. Sometimes I'm tired and can't think of anything but big words that mean nothing. So anyway, thanks you guys. Hope you have a great rest of your week and we look forward to chatting with you again soon.